Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share with us how her abusive, traumatic childhood actually led her to a successful career helping other women declutter their trauma and declutter their lives. Today's guest is Krystal Holm. Hi, Krystal. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your amazingly busy schedule. How are you this morning?
I am great, Claudia. How are you this morning?
I am good as well. It's warming up here in Colorado, so that's nice. I finally get to wear a short sleeve shirt, so that's pretty cool. I know. I love your shirt. You look gorgeous today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I appreciate it. I think you have some really interesting things that you're going to share today with our audience, kind of how you grew up and how that led you into the career that you have now and how you help a lot of women, particularly with that career. So for starters, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, my name is Krystal. I'm a feng shui designer and a clutter expert. And I help soul-driven women to use feng shui the right way to create peace and prosperity in all areas of their lives. That's kind of what I do in a nutshell, really. I have my own proprietary method that I use to work with them. And that's sort of what I do.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. So what really hits for me is the declutter, because I think that's something all of us can benefit from. I know where I live is a smaller place because property prices are insane here. So it became a situation where you have to learn to live with less. And I think that's something that you really work on, of getting rid of the things that we don't need. So I do want to delve into that, but I want to start with how you got here. And I want to talk a little bit about your childhood, because I know your parents divorced and you ended up with two different families, basically, and you kind of split time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My parents divorced when I was 8. And they actually both remarried by the time I was about 9, really. My mom married into a very abusive man. He was a pedophile and a child abuser. And my dad married my hero, the woman who became my hero, let's be honest. She became my first mentor, really. I had told my mother what was happening while she was still dating her boyfriend, and she didn't believe me. She covered it up, and I gave her an ultimatum that it was him or me, and she actually chose him. And it was that day that I chose I would never ever be like her. And when my dad married my stepmom, she became sort of this huge part of my life. She became a huge mentor in my life, and she actually was the person that introduced me to, it's like energy work on the big picture, right? She was very into that sort of thing. And so she'd introduced me to, palm reading and magic and as a 9-year-old girl, of course I was fascinated, right? What girl is not fascinated with making potions and playing witch in the backyard? Like that's what we do, right? And so, but because I had this situation going on the other side of my home, or my home life, I sort of always wanted to find a way to magically change it, right? It was sort of a thing for me that I latched onto. And so it became something that I studied a lot: energy, manifestation, magic. How do I change my life for something different? How do I have a different life altogether? And as I got older, I had a lot of limiting beliefs that came along with being told being told I was a liar, being told all of this stuff that sort of happened and went through it. And so as I got older, I was always trying to figure out who I was going to be and how I was going to be that, and looking for that leadership and that mentorship and that guidance as to how I can be that. And when I went back to school, as an adult, I sort of found feng shui accidentally there. It was in my psychology class that we were given the assignment to write a paper related to our field and my field of study as an interior designer. And I had heard of feng shui. It was still somewhat new, but I didn't know enough about it. And so I started delving into it for the paper. And there was so much confusing information out there that like, I felt like I knew less when I was done with the paper than I did. It just gave me more questions. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward a couple of years to where I'm actually in my career as a designer, and I was living in Hawaii, and we had clients that they were from China, and they had been showed their design, and they were like, no, the feng shui is all off in this office. And my boss was like, who knows anything at all about feng shui? And I'm like, well, me, I do a little, what else are you going to do? It's your dream job. I was trying to show up and really show my value to them. And so I was like, me, and she's like, great, I need you to fix this. And I was just sort of like shit my pants for a little while. Like, what do I do? Because it felt so confusing to me. Like I didn't really know. And I was like, I really was interested and I really wanted to follow it. Mm-hmm. But I didn't feel like I know enough. I felt very much like an imposter. And so, I actually went back to school to become a feng shui consultant, or to at least learn about feng shui. I didn't even want to become a consultant. I just wanted to know more so that I could do my job better. If that was going to be a big component, like that would set me apart from all of the other designers. And so I started studying it on my own, and everywhere I looked, even the classes as I went through there's a college, several of them actually. And so I would go through the classes, beginner and intermediate and advanced and all of them. And every one of them talked about clutter, but none of them talked about clutter. Like they just talked about like how important it was and how it will stagnate the energy and the impact, but it didn't really dive into like the psychology of it. But I think because I had come at it from a psychology thing, and I'd already been studying and looking for my own healing, my own mentorship, my own something. And so I sort of started I've always sort of had this dual path, right? Because even as a young child, when I would go back to my mom's home, my favorite toy there was like my Barbie dream house. Like I'd spend all my day just rearranging furniture. So, I was just up here doing the same thing. And I started, okay, now I know enough about feng shui. I can start taking my clients and start practicing with them. And everybody would talk about clutter, and they would tell me their stories about clutter and what was going on. And I started really connecting the dots. And I was on my healing journey and my career path sort of simultaneously. I didn't really have a lot of faith in traditional therapy. My parents had taken me to a therapist when I was young. And when I told him about the situation at home and the abuse and all of the things, he literally compared me to a wild horse being trapped in a corral, aching for freedom and just going to die next to the fence, and how I should settle in and how much happier these horses are when they're broken to being ridden. And I was like, you are comparing my child abuse, my sexual abuse, my religious abuse, my physical abuse, to a wild horse being broken to riding, and I should accept it. And so I had some huge stuff around therapy and psychiatrists and psychologists, but I found personal development seminars and programs and going through these experiential things where I was able to really face my own demons, right? And so as I was going through these parallel journeys, I started really connecting the dots around what is clutter and why does it have such an impact? Because in feng shui, it will talk about that there is one, but not why, and not understanding it. And so the more I really delved into it and the more I started really unpacking it and listening to these clients that I was taking in, it was just like, oh, this is really, really the thing. This is the problem. This is where all of the answers are. And eventually I developed my own method after all of this. It took a few years, but let's be honest. But, it was as I put it all together, that I developed, it's the designed life method, mind, body, soul, home. And it's how I now help clients with their own clutter and their own space.
I have so many things I want to talk to you about right now. So I don't even know where to start, but I think we'll start semi-chronologically. You had a really difficult childhood growing up, and I don't like to compare people's traumas because that's not fair to anybody. But how difficult was it for you to suffer the abuse that you were suffering, and then as an 8-year-old to have the courage to speak out about it? Because first off, that's the hardest part for a lot of people, especially at that young age, is to even speak up, but to then be shut down. Was that like getting traumatized and abused all over again for you?
It really was. And it really played a huge, huge part in my whole life, right? Because when I told my mom, like before she married him, and I told him there's something wrong and this is not right. And then she married him anyway, right? Then I felt like that's like the ultimate rejection. It's the ultimate betrayal. But then after they were married and I told my father and he fought for custody, right? And then I had to tell the social worker and the guardian ad litem and the attorney and all of these people. And my sisters told the same story. And my mother literally came along behind and just swept it all up and said, Krystal's lying and the other ones are lying because they're just following her lead. And it literally just is like, I couldn't tell anybody, I tried and nobody ever would listen. I would, and it shut me down completely. I always sort of, even as I got older, I always felt like I had to prove my worth to everyone in every relationship, in every job. Even when I started my business, to my clients, I had to prove that I knew what I was talking about. Like I always felt like nobody was ever going to believe me. No one ever was going to believe in me. But it felt like it was over and over and over again. Like there was this betrayal. When I was 11, I wrote my first book. And it was a story about a cheerleader who gangbanged the entire football team. And my mother found the book and literally she shared it with her sister. And I overheard them talking about how I must be being molested. And they then blamed it on my father, destroyed the book and shamed me for writing it. Like just over and over, it was silenced. So when I started my business and I hired a coach because it was my sixth business, right? I'd tried over so many times and failed at every one. And so I hired a coach and she would tell me like, you got to tell your story. You got to tell your story. And I would be like, I don't know what story. I would just be locked up in this. What do you mean? I don't know if I'm doing it right and nobody's going to believe me. And then when I finally started telling my story, there was sheer terror every time I would like post on social media. First, expecting my mother to show up and troll in the comments and call me a liar. And then if it wasn't going to be her, it was going to be somebody trolling my comments and calling me a liar. Right. So it was this constant overcoming of this fear of somebody calling me or telling me I don't know what I'm talking about or calling me stupid or whatever. There was just so much going through, like to be able to put myself out there enough to be seen and to be heard and even to help people. Like I couldn't help anybody if they can't see me, but I couldn't even help myself if I couldn't tell my story. So yeah, it was a long, long journey and it had a huge, long lasting impact on up to this day. I mean, I'll be 50 this year, 42 years that I am even now just like at peace with the journey. But yeah, it's still in there. I'm still pulling out pieces. I'm still unpacking my own trauma. It's a lifelong impact that something like that happens. Your whole relationship with women as a whole starts with your mother. So that sort of a betrayal at such a young age was excruciating.
So I definitely want to dive into that a little bit more. First, I want to say I've had several amazing women so far appear on this podcast. And for some reason, all of you are lying and you're pretending to be older than you must be, because there's no way that you're going to be 50 this year.
I sure
So
am.
there's that. You look fantastic. Let me just say that.
Thank you.
So back to the relationship with your mom, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, and that was what I wanted to dig a little deeper on, was how that affected your relationships going forward. Because like you said, that's your first female relationship with your mom, and that kind of determines how you're going to deal with other females in life. But it sounds like that's a continuing, I don't know, struggle's the right word, but a continuing thing that you have to work on even now. Would that be accurate?
Less so now. I definitely have better relationships with women now, but it certainly had a long impact for a lot of years. You know, I would have even some people that I thought were friends that were actually just other versions that were also, I had a lot of mean girl friends that, you know, you think you're their friend and yet they're the same, that same person behind. I didn't have good relationships with friends. I said for probably until I was in my mid 30s that I didn't really have girlfriends. I had a lot of guy friends because it was easier for me to be friends with men than with women. But it really wasn't until I started being intentional. When I first started on really diving into my healing journey, I went to a seminar and then I went to another seminar. And then I had the opportunity to go to a women's leadership seminar. It was just for women. I think there was 50 of us. I think we had an exact round number of 50 that were there. And it was 10 days. And that was the one where it was just like come face to face. And I remember doing this exercise and being in there. And that was, we talked about it. That was literally what they talked about beforehand, that this is the beginning of your relationship with all women. And, was that we were doing this exercise. It was a closed eye, meditation, guided meditation. And I was in the front row and the instructor was sitting like 3 feet in front of me in her chair, and she's doing the thing. And I'm sitting there with my eyes closed and I'm feeling all of this stuff rise up. And it's in my throat and I'm literally choking on it. And I'm trying my hardest to swallow it back down, and because I couldn't breathe. And I can feel it right now. It's funny. And I realized I had this moment of clarity that I was literally swallowing down the same stuff that I'd been swallowing since I was 8. And this was in November of 2012. And I just was like, no more, I'm not doing it. And I could hear all these other women in the room. Some of them are screaming and some of them had great relationships with their moms. Some of them are joyful, but there's a lot of pain that I can hear all around me. And I just let it out. And I literally vomited on the floor for about 3 minutes. Just nothing actually came out of my body, but it was very much like just vomit and vomit and vomit and vomit. And then I had this sensation of almost like a minty cleanse tingled through my entire system down to the tips of my fingers and the tips of my toes and kind of went all the way through. And, and then came back out and I sort of had one more little purge, and there was such a release in that. I've had similar experiences over the years as I have gone back to that relationship. And every time I do, I've addressed it with all of the different mother figures, because I started looking for a new mom when I was 8. I literally was like, I'm never going to be anything like you. So I need to find a different model to model myself after. And yeah, so I faced them so many times, and each one has been its own cathartic kind of healing thing. But as that has happened, I have gotten healthier and healthier relationships with other women that are also on that healing journey. I find it's harder, like, because there's so much toxicity that is poured into us as women that it's hard to just swim upstream against it. So I've definitely, my relationships with women has shifted. I don't have a relationship with my mother. But it's healthier for me and it's happier for me to not, and I think that's the healthiest way for me to address it, to be quite honest, is just have healthy relationships with non-toxic women. And that really helps me with my own toxic stuff, right? Because that's really what I'm doing, is purging all the toxic stuff that I was fed for so long. So,
right. We talk a lot when it comes to abuse, domestic violence, all of those things, about the cycle of violence. And quite often people who are abused end up abusing others or in future relationships where they're abused, and that cycle just continues. But when you were 8, you made the conscious decision, I will not be like you. How difficult was that as you grew up to not be like her?
Oh, hard. And I still turned out a lot like her. There would still be things that I would find. There would be all the things I would hate about myself. And I would find them and I would be like, oh yeah, no, I don't, this is not, it's just some of the internal stuff that I had internalized that I didn't even realize. But I definitely found myself in 2 relationships that were very much like hers, abusive. They were not abusive to me, but they were, and I can't say physically abusive to my children, but certainly mentally abusive, emotionally abusive, even emotionally and mentally abusive to me. I found myself in those relationships until I was about 30, and until I walked away and was like, nope, I can't. And I didn't even walk away for me. I walked away because they weren't good enough for my children. Like, I wouldn't put my kids through that. I still couldn't stand up for me. I would take the abuse, but I would always end relationships if they weren't good enough for my children. So it made me very different from her in that. And my kids were always like, oh no, you're not good enough. Bye. But I had one relationship that was pretty abusive. And strangely enough, after I left that relationship, the next one, I found myself as in the role of more of the abuser. Just that I was going to be nope, I wear the pants in this family. Like, you don't get to talk to me at all. And we would, the roles would be reversed. Like, we would fight and he would cry, and instead of me, like, and it was like, and then I thought, yeah, I don't like this person either. Like, I can't be this person. I won't be that. So then I had to, and that was when I think my journey really started. Like, I had no good relationships with men. I didn't have good relationships with women. I didn't have a good relationship with myself. Like, it was like just not nothing.
Good.
Like, no, I'm going to start somewhere. Like, because everything was just nothing like what I wanted. And I knew it was still, I didn't have the life I wanted. I didn't have the relationships I wanted. I didn't have any of the things that I wanted. And it was just, everywhere I looked was just the mirror that kept pointing back saying, you got to work on you. You got to work on you. And everything I learned was to blame it on other people. Right. And it's not my fault. I'm the victim here. Right. Until I started facing it. I hate fake it till you make it culture. I do. Face it and then you will make it. But it took me a long time to face it. And that was sort of the thing. Like, not being able to face what was wrong with me. Why wasn't I good enough for my own mom? Why wasn't...
Just why?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about your career and feng shui and being in Hawaii and how you felt like an imposter. And you just mentioned the fake it till you make it. And I know you hate that. So I do want you to talk a little bit more about that and how you made that shift from, no, I don't want to fake it till I make it. I want to face it, and what that's done for you in your healing and even in your business.
Well, where do I start with that? Fake it till I make it. One of my parents' highest values is perfection. So we had to practice being perfect all the time. No matter what kind of a shit show was going on at home, we would have to practice church a lot, right? So we could practice being perfect for church. And faking it, right? Because we were faking it because it was so miserable. And what I learned from faking it is just how to be a better faker. I learned how to stuff it down. I learned how to pretend. I learned how to put a good show on it. I learned how, to make everybody think I was successful. And I wasn't. I was failing miserably at everything in my life. And I was never making it, but I was very good at faking it. But when I started facing it, right, is when I finally started making it. And so it was sort of like this, but we are so taught with this fake it till you make it thing that it's a awful way to, like nobody faces it and nobody wants to because it's painful and it's traumatic and it sucks. But it's what got me, at least for me, it's what got me here, right? And so having to find like some sort of purpose in it, some gratitude in it, something in it of an answer.
You made a great point. I think when we fake it till we make it, it gets so easy and comfortable to just keep faking it. And we don't move forward a lot of times into the making it because we just get in that comfort zone of faking it. And like you said, you learn how to do that better and you learn how to put on that facade and that mask and just keep faking it. So why do anything different? Because you're in that at least comfortable area of faking it. So I love how you made that twist into, no, I'm not going to fake it anymore. I'm going to face it.
Right. I'm not going to swallow it down anymore. I'm not going to keep pretending like I had this great, fabulous childhood. But nobody wants to face the thing that's going to make them vomit on the floor in front of a room full of people because your childhood was so bad that literally you don't have words. Like the first time was just screams. I didn't have words. I've had hyperventilating where it was just, I can't breathe. Like that sort of trauma, that sort of rejection, like nobody wants to really face that and really get real and raw with the pain that they're carrying inside. And they just keep carrying it. And that's what I was doing. I was just continuing to carry it and just continuing to fake it on the outside. And I was literally bleeding to death on the inside. I have an autoimmune disorder, right? And I believe all of that is from carrying these secrets for so long, not being able to talk about them and be honest about them and just trying to shove it all down. Like we all have all this mental health problems, all these physical health problems, like new diseases every day. Like, where is this coming from? I think it's just a collective trauma of an entire generation of children that were taught to fake it and stuff it down and pretend like everything is great. And it's awful.
Right. And there are so many, I feel like, correlations to the mental and the emotional and the physical. And you have illustrated that so perfectly in a lot of different ways, from speaking about your autoimmune disease that you feel like is related to the trauma that you suffered and to the cathartic experience that you had when you were able to release everything in that leadership experience or that event that you had. So how do you share this with others in a way that helps them flip that switch from faking it to facing it and really diving into their trauma and starting to heal?
Well, I actually have a proprietary method that I use with clients, and I developed it through my own process, first, going through it myself and then working with a few clients, sort of like I've always done, to practice and build it up. And I call it the designed life method, mind, body, soul, home. And so the first thing we address is that mindset piece. And it is connected to clutter. There's a psychological connection and it tells the story. And so we start with what I call declutter your mindset, right? And then we do go into the next part, which I call design your evolution, which is the body phase. And we literally design a practice for you to declutter all these pieces, for you to do your own healing practice, right? We create space for it in your workspace. We align the energy so that your vision and your goals are all in alignment with the activities that you're doing, so that the energy is flowing and being charged by those activities, and just design it right into your space. Because the truth is, your home is your connection point to the earth, to the world, right? This is where you live. It's an extension of your energetic frequency, and you have an energetic frequency and your home has an energetic frequency. And they're really either in alignment with each other or they're not. And when they're not, it's chaos and clutter and struggle and strife. And when they are, it's flow and ease. And that's the purpose of vision boards, right? We put these pictures up of, this is what I want my future to be. But because your home is an extension, it's literally a reflection of what's going on internally and what's going on externally, like in your career or your finances or your relationships or your health. And so we can create your entire space to be that vision board of who you're becoming. The person that has all the pictures in their little frame, or all those things, not the pictures. The person that has the pictures is you now. The person that has the actual things is the person that, lives in that space. So we create the whole vision board or the whole space into one that's energetically aligned with it, or you are aligned with it to manifest it, as opposed to just some pictures on the wall that really are more like another hammer to beat yourself up for why I don't have this already, right? I sort of see those vision boards, that's almost what they are. It's just another hammer that we have been, most of us, brought up with, right? Beating yourself up for not being more successful, not getting an A. Why did you just get a B? Why wouldn't you an A? Why didn't you do this already? Why haven't? That's what those vision boards kind of are. But when you design it into your space energetically, then you have to align with it, because that's how energy works. Like you will sync up, just like when you go outside and you hang out outside for a certain amount of time, your body will start to vibrate to, I think it's like 7.3 megahertz or whatever it is, the frequency of Earth. The same will happen in your space. So I help them create that space so that it is a 3D vision board for their whole life. But it's also that I firmly believe your home is your castle. It should be a sanctuary, not a prison. And your work should be a work sanctuary, not just a cubicle prison. Like, we should find joy in our space, and our space should bring us joy. And that's how I help people really empower themselves and in their own healing journey, right? I'm a big believer in the healing journey can only be done within, right? It's only I can heal me. I mean, I could have a doctor set my bone or heal with surgery. Like, we need them. Don't get me wrong. I had my surgery. I know you had yours not that long ago. Like, we need them. But the healing part can only be done by the person that needs to be healed. You just need the leader, the guide, the teacher. And so, yeah, that's how I help people to really set themselves up to become who they want to be, someone that they're happy with and they admire, and that
brings them joy.
Right. And who they want to be, right? When they were 8, who did they envision they wanted to be when they were a grown up? Are they? And let's get them there. So, and who is she? So, yeah.
How often do you deal with women who want to come to you, but they want you to fix everything? They want you to declutter their life. They want you to declutter their home. They want you to create that castle. And they're maybe a little resistant because, well, Krystal's going to do all that for me. Do you run into that a lot?
Somewhat. I don't go to the home to do the work for people. But I do find that it's very hard for people to face it. So even sometimes when people do come to me, they're not always ready. And so the best thing that I can do for them is just hold that space for them to step fully in. It's it's a journey. It's not an overnight thing. And so it takes bravery I really see the bravery of my clients when they come. And so when they falter and they have that moment of, I can't right now, I know it takes that kind of time. And so I'm there and I just there's nothing else I can do. It's their journey. The only thing I can do is hold space for them and be here. And that seems to be what they need. And that seems to be what serves them best, because I can't go and do it for everyone. I can help usually the people that are stuck, right? And they can't quite get to the next thing. What they really need is more one-on-one, where it's because we often get stuck in the how-to. I need to know how to. And it's easier to pretend to be confused than it is to really, really face it. And so I find a lot of times they just need a little extra hand-holding because they've got the harder stories. And they've never had somebody in their corner to face it with them. And so it actually, my story gives me the ability to have that compassion and understand that it's what they're in, and how hard it is to tell. A lot of them don't want to say what's really wrong. I sometimes they come to me. I had a client not that long ago that came to me, and her biggest struggle had to do around obligation and the clutter that she really, really needed to get rid of was her husband, but she didn't want to face that. And it's, for me to be the one that's like, I hear you, I'm hearing you and I'm hearing you. And I think this is what you don't want to look at. And sometimes it's just my job to be that mirror and say, I'm hearing what you're saying. Here is what you are not looking at. And I think it's hard. It's hard for both of us, but it helps me and it helps them, right? And a lot of times usually they take a little time and come back to me, but because it's painful. Like we don't want to face the ugly. Everybody wants beauty.
Speaking of not facing the ugly, you shared something with me the last time we spoke that I found so interesting, something I'd never really thought of before. And we were talking about how when somebody goes over to another person's house, and when you get to their house, it's just absolutely spotless. But the first thing they say is, "Oh, please excuse the mess." And you're looking around going, I don't see the mess. What are you talking about? Well, you told me subconsciously what they're actually talking about. So would you share a little bit about that and what that really means, generally speaking?
Sure. I find it, I used to be this girl. I'll be honest. I used to be her. And I've had quite a few friends that were this girl we're literally apologizing for the internal mess. Right? Because my house could be spotless. There was a point in my life that we were doing a remodel of our home. It was an old home, lath and plaster with blown in insulation. Do you know how dusty those are? Right? So much dust. And I can tell you, I think my kids were like 5 and 7 at the time. And I worked 2 jobs and I still managed to keep my house so clean you could eat off the floors. And I would apologize for the mess. And it was literally apologizing for all the things that are wrong with me, right? All of the internal stuff. Because had you actually opened a closet in my house or a drawer in my house, you wouldn't have necessarily found, the impeccably clean space. I've always had this thing. I used to fight with my mom when I was young, always, because she would want the house spotless, but my room is always messy. My bedroom has always been my space to be free, and it would never be that clean. And it was always like, this is nobody's business. But they're definitely apologizing for what's going on inside, and even to some degree what's going on outside, because it's being reflected in their career and their relationships and their self-worth and their, how they feel about all of their stuff. And so it was funny as I started making these connections with clutter and our relationship with it and our relationships with our space, how I started understanding it. And it was like, yeah, I'm not apologizing for my messy house anymore. And I'm not cleaning it up just to pretend like everything is perfect. You came over, my house is a mess. Oh, not sorry. Let's have a good time and enjoy each other's company instead of pretending like we are these people. It keeps us separate. It's dishonest. We're not connecting because we're hiding the truth.
It's yet another thing to create that facade and to create that fake. And I know we all have done it. I still do it. Somebody's coming over and let's be honest, generally speaking, the people that are coming over to your house know you. They're friends. You would think, like, random strangers aren't just coming over to our houses, so they know us. And so why do we feel like we have to hide everything? And I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to everybody else right now. But why do we do that? Why do we feel like, oh, I've got to make everything perfect. I've got to throw everything in the room where I'm going to close the door so nobody sees that. It's so interesting to me, and it does really seem like a reflection of so many other things rather than just, I'm going to straighten up the house. My husband is going to love this when he hears this because I do that all the time. I'm picking stuff up and, well, so-and-so's coming over, so I probably just ruined myself here.
It's not to say you don't want to, and it's not even about making a good impression, right? For some, it's showing, I love you. I'm inviting you to my home. I want my home to be welcoming to you. I want it to be clean and presentable to you because I love you. And if you show up on a day unannounced and it's messy, I love you enough and I know that you love me enough to love me in my mess. And honestly, those other people that show up uninvited and unwelcome, nobody really wants the door-to-door salesman to show up at their front door or the Jehovah's Witnesses to come by. And we don't care if they see our messy house. We only care if the people that love us see our messy house, because we have to fake it for them more than anyone, because they always expect us to be strong. They don't like us to be weak. And I mean, when was the last time you let your kids just see you having a meltdown because, you didn't make enough money this month, or you can't afford bills, or, you had a fight with your spouse, or your job sucks. And you're just like, nothing's wrong. We constantly have to fake it for the people that they love us the most and are there to support us the most. But we pretend the most with them too, because we try to pretend with ourselves more than anyone.
The people that we should really allow ourselves to be vulnerable with and allow to see us in our moments of weakness or needing help are the people that we spend the most time with our masks on around, I feel like.
Right. I agree. Because especially if we were never good enough as we are, right? I've had friends that I felt like I had to be somebody entirely different when I was around them. And not even that I necessarily felt like I had to be, just that I was. I just became this different person when I was around them. And then I was like, I don't really like this person. I don't like me. I don't like them. But yeah, these, especially the people that are in our lives that whether it's, I believe it's sort of by choice. I don't believe in forced relationships with people. So friends, family, if you don't, or if you're not there because you love me and you're only there out of obligation, then please go. Just be there for love. And that's how we will all get better. That was how we will all heal collectively, instead of all this hate and secrecy.
Let's chat about family for a minute, because I have been in the same boat, and I know a lot of people have that feeling of, well, family's family, can't get rid of them. Gotta keep your family around because that's blood. But there are often times that family does not serve you. And I don't mean serve you, in that way, but serve your best interest and your mental and emotional wellness and health and all those things. So how do you feel about that? And I think we know, because you've talked about your non-relationship with your mom, but share for a moment why it's okay to let family go if it's not a healthy relationship.
Because you're not obligated to them. You're not. The thing is, children don't ask to be born. Parents choose to have them, and parents are obligated to children to provide for them and to serve them, really. And yet, so many of us grow up with this very religious belief about honoring our parents. Mm-hmm. And it creates this sense of obligation that we are obligated to take care of them. And yet it's wrong. We are not. I was not born to take care of my parents when they are old. I didn't choose it. Mm-hmm. If I had chosen it, I definitely wouldn't have chosen them. Like, I wouldn't have the life I have now. So I'm grateful that I have it. But you know what I mean? Like, if we had a choice going in the beginning, who would choose that? Like, it's parents that are obligated, not children. And so we put all this obligation on the next generation to take care of the elderly as it's an expectation, as opposed to taking care of people because you love them, not because you're supposed to. Right? It's very backwards the way we view it on what that expectation is. Who is obligated to who and what direction that flows. And I think that is where it starts, really.
I completely agree. And I love that you said that. I think so many people do feel that obligation, and it is, whether it's societal, generational, I think, like you said, much of it does stem from religion and church. And I'm not downing religion or church, but there is that honor thy mother and father. But to what end and to what detriment to ourselves? And not just mother and father, but brother, sister, cousin. There are all kinds of familial relationships that I think aren't healthy for us, but so many people stay in them because they feel that obligation. How do we break that cycle?
Well, that's where it gets difficult, right? You have to look at it starts with yourself, right? Looking at where are you putting obligations, right? Where are you putting out obligations onto other people? Where are you putting your expectations on other people, right? And starting with yourself first, right? It's everything starts with ourselves first. You can't change other people. That's why I also believe that we are not obligated to family, because some people are toxic and unwilling to even take responsibility for it or acknowledge that they are the problem, right? And if they are not willing to change and grow and do something about it, that's unhealthy to me. I can't have healthy relationships with toxic people, and I'm unwilling to have unhealthy relationships with them. And so if they're not willing to do that, like, I can't force them to change. I can't do anything. I tried for decades to get my mother to do the work, to get my children to do the work. And because I passed on some of those toxic things to my children, right? I was a teenager when they were born also. I was not healed. I was still very toxic. So they grew up with some very different, but still toxic. And I couldn't force it on them. I couldn't force it on her. You can't force other people. You can only heal you. So if you're dealing with obligation, it starts with, no, I am obligated to me. I love me enough to say, nope, this is a boundary. And it doesn't have to be like, mine is, no, I don't talk to you. Like I have, there's other boundaries. I have boundaries with some, like we don't talk about this, or we don't talk about
Right.
this, or you can have varying degrees of boundaries of what's okay and what's not. But that all starts with you. And that all starts with releasing your limiting beliefs and your mindset stuff around what you are obligated to and who and what that looks like. So, there's a lot of work in there to unpack about, but it all starts with you and becoming a version of you that stands in that place and is willing to say, no, do not cross this line with me because this is toxic and this is not what I will tolerate.
And that's the problem with so many of us who have experienced abuse and trauma is we aren't worth it in our minds. We aren't worth loving ourselves enough to set those boundaries, to set those limits, to think about ourselves first. Right.
We were never taught how to do that. And most of us were taught only how to have our boundaries violated.
Right.
I was almost 50 before I learned how to set boundaries. I probably have only learned how to really set boundaries in the last year of my life.
But how much does that serve you now? How great is that?
So much. And it literally comes from having every boundary I ever set violated over and over and over and over until we learn how to be one way. But who you become is a choice. It's a choice every day of who you're going to be and who you're going to become next. So, and some of those choices are very hard. And what you're going to tolerate is one of those choices. And it has to come around every single thing in your life, every person, every activity, every relationship, like everything. What do I tolerate at my job? What do I tolerate in my business? What do I tolerate in my relationships? What am I tolerating with my health? All of it starts there. And that's all obligation and worth.
Right. And what I really appreciate that you just said is you said, it took me till almost 50 to really set those boundaries. And what I hope people hear from that is that it is never too late to do that. It's never too late to think about yourself first and start setting those boundaries, whether you're 30, 40, 50, 80, whatever. It's always okay to do that, and it's worth doing it. I mean, would you say in just the short time that you started doing that, there's a big difference in your happiness and the quality of your life?
100%. I would say I set this boundary, like this wall of power. It's a very empowering place to be. It was on my 49th birthday, actually. And it has been just almost immediately was a complete 180 in the sense of confidence I felt, the sense of empowerment I felt, and the sense of owning my place in the world. Like I deserved to be here for the first time in my life. It was okay. Like I didn't have to feel guilty about my own existence anymore. That is literally the power of setting boundaries. I don't have to apologize for my existence.
I just wanted that to sit for a second because that is so powerful to hear and to say.
Right. My mom was 16 when I was born. I spent my whole life as a mistake, an accident. It was my fault, right? It was my fault that she got pregnant. It took a long, long time to set a boundary and say, no, no, no. I'm not guilty. I'm worthy. I belong here. I have a right to be here, and I have a right to say, this is my space. This is what I own this.
I love it. I love it. What would you say is one piece of advice? Let's do a couple advice moments here. So you talked about making even your workspace your own. Obviously, your home is your castle. Let's talk about those people real quick that have a tiny little cubicle that is dark and dingy and miserable. And now that we're getting out of COVID, people are probably having to go back to those cubicles. So what's one thing that they can do quickly and easily to make that space a little more conducive to happiness and productivity and wellness?
Surround yourself with things that inspire you and that you love. It's declutter the things that demotivate you, right? Especially when you're in a cubicle at work. I think a lot of people are never going to go back to work. And I think a lot of them are going to be working from home from now on. And I think the biggest thing you can do there is make room for yourself. If you have your own business and your own office and you're working at home, make room for yourself. If you are working for another company and you're just working from home, make room for yourself. I know that's hard, especially with the way things are right now. If there's a way for you to, double your kids up in a bedroom and take one bedroom for yourself for an office, do that if it's possible. But it matters. This whole idea of going back to the way things used to be is not what's going to happen, right? The way we live in our space is going to change drastically moving forward. It's time to put ourselves first. You can't build a business or a career, have your job, if you're just trying to work on a tiny little desk in the corner of your bedroom or your dining room, and you're trying to shove it off as this tiny little piece of your life. We don't have pieces of our lives. We don't have a work life and a home life and a married life. We have one life. We have to make room for our life, period. If that means your kids double up until your lease runs out and now you rent a bigger apartment so you have room for an office and your kids can have a bedroom, do that if it's possible. But make room for your life. Make room for who you're becoming. It's the only way you're going to become her.
I love that. What is one piece of relationship advice? Whether it's romantic relationship, family relationship, friendships, what's your number one? Here it is. Lay it on us.
Healthy conversation, adult conversation. You have to do the work to heal the inner trauma of what's bringing you to the table. Because if we have conflict in our relationships, it's usually not the adult version of us that's showing up for that conflict. It's usually the traumatized child version of us that's showing up. So if you don't do the work to heal your own trauma, you are bringing that to the relationship. And so it's a disservice to yourself. It's a disservice to your partner or to whomever it is. It could be your boss. It could be your best friend. It could be, your mailman, whatever it is, that relationship. If you are not bringing the best of you to that relationship, you are bringing, I can't say the worst of you, but you need to do the work and you need to, so does your partner, right? And I don't believe we can force them to do things, but there is a level of accountability there. I don't necessarily believe that this cancel culture is really cancel culture. I believe there's a big need for accountability culture, a lot. So if I'm doing the work and to heal me so that I can bring a whole version of me to my relationship and you're not willing to do the work, then we can't be in this relationship because I need to hold you accountable. Not hold you accountable. That's not the right way to frame it. But I have to have healthy relationships. If you are still toxic, we cannot be healthy. So then I have to set boundaries with you. And that's the level of accountability. Like, nope, we can't talk about this. You can't come on Tuesdays. Like, you can only come when I invite you. You don't get to, you don't get to show up. You don't get to call me. You don't get to contact me in any way. Like, whatever that level of boundaries is, it starts with you. And you have to bring a healthy you to the table. so that you can have grown up conversations that look like, sometimes these are hard conversations. That's what being an adult is, like having hard conversations. But you can't do it if you're showing up with your traumatized child version.
Absolutely. Well, I've taken up so much of your time today, but it has been amazing. If people aren't already following you, don't already know where to find you, where can they find you, Krystal?
You can certainly find me online and all of social media. Krystal Holm is my website. My social media is all of my name, or Feng Shui Krystal in some way, shape, or form. It's there. You can find me at, I have a masterclass that I offer once a month. You can register for at moneyspacemasterclass.com. And, you can work with me at soulandspacealignment.com. I do offer, programs to work with me every month, to be able to come in and do the work and set yourself up for becoming the best version of you. Let's create space for her to be born. That's really what setting boundaries feels like. I feel like I was born. Like it's this freeing thing to declutter the past and move forward into becoming that person. So, and that's what we do in Soul and Space Alignment.
Awesome. Well, I know there are going to be people reaching out to you for sure. You had so much insight to share today. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.
I've loved being here. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Krystal and learned as much as I did. And if nothing else, remember, you have to take care of yourself first. So until next week, remember, you are strong enough and you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're available on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.